Welcome to Serial Knowledge Crimecast, the podcast that dives into the most unsettling real life cases, uncovering the dark realities behind headlines that haunt us. I'm Brianna.
And I'm Meg.
In this episode, we turn the spotlight on two cases that have both captivated and horrified the public: the disturbing saga of Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, a couple whose twisted beliefs and dangerous actions led to the disappearance and deaths of two innocent children. From doomsday cults to shocking betrayals, the story of Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow is one of deception, manipulation, and chilling tragedy. And then we shift to another devastating story: the brutal murder of 13-year-old Tristyn Bailey, a young girl full of potential. Tristyn's life was cruelly stolen by someone she knew, leaving a community grappling with disbelief and heartbreak. Both of these cases are tragedies in their own right, yet they share an unsettling thread: the devastating impact of secrets, lies, and trust betrayed. Now, this first story, Meg, is one that I think goes to show that crazy people can tend to find each other in the most unusual circumstances. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about a couple episodes ago of the Bonnie and Clyde syndrome type of thing. It's fascinating the fact that two people can share such twisted beliefs and morals. Yeah, so I guess I'll turn this one over to you.
So this is the case of Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow. So we'll start with Lori Vallow, her previous relationship. She was with her high school sweetheart, which was her first husband, and that was very short-lived. I think it was maybe a few months, maybe a year, something like that. Her second husband, who goes by Billy, they had a son together. That's her oldest son, Colby Ryan. If you have seen the Netflix documentary, that is her son who was in the Netflix documentary. Joseph Ryan was Tylee's father, and Charles Vallow was JJ's adopted father.
In that Netflix documentary, I know that Colby Ryan, he was a big advocate for the truth throughout this whole thing, and he also was pretty critical of Chad Daybell.
Obviously, his very young siblings were murdered. And knowing what he knew, he obviously just wanted justice, which I don't blame him at all.
So how did Chad and Lori even meet?
They met at a Doomsday Prepper conference in Utah. This was in late 2018, early 2019. They shared a belief in the concept of preparing for the end of time, which led them to become romantically involved. This was when she was still married to Charles Vallow, who was JJ's adopted father.
And now Charles Vallow has an interesting end to his life, doesn't he?
Yes. So Charles Vallow was, like I said, her third husband, and he was murdered in February of 2019. So this was right around the time that she had met Chad Daybell. He was shot by Alex Cox, who is Lori's brother. They both claimed it was self-defense. Lori had claimed that Charles attacked her.
It was like a fight that happened in their home, right?
Right. And I think what really, made me mad was she had gotten her daughter in on it. Like Tylee was defending the fact that Alex had killed Charles.
Charles and Alex were having their altercation. Tylee had like grabbed a baseball bat and was
Yeah.
trying to defend them in that situation.
I think obviously she just wants to defend her mother.
And so this killing what led Lori to ultimately move to Idaho, right?
Yes. So Lori had inherited Charles' life insurance after that. And then she moved JJ and Tylee to Ruxburg, Idaho. And that is about the time that she had met Chad Daybell. So right after that she had met him, and that is when Tylee and JJ's lives started taking a turn for the worse. Not long after Lori and Chad had met, the kids went missing. This was about September of 2019. Tylee was last seen at Yellowstone National Park on September 8th, and JJ was last seen at their apartment on September 23rd. Nobody had heard from them or seen them. Family members and their friends became concerned after not hearing from them, so they contacted law enforcement. Lori told her friends and family very conflicting stories about where they were. She claimed that Tylee had gone to college and JJ was staying with friends in Arizona. And I remember from the documentary, I believe that JJ's I may be wrong, but JJ's, like, biological mother or
It
grandmother
was
or something.
his grandparents.
Right, they had contacted this family that Lori had claimed JJ was staying with, and they had no idea. They had not seen or spoken to JJ.
Yeah, because they went, like, canvassing those apartments trying to find JJ, and the apartment was, like, cleared out. There was nothing left.
Yeah, because I believe that's when Lori and Chad were getting ready to flee.
Yeah, and there's, like, no signs of the children from any of these people that they're claiming have any indications. Like, I remember seeing the photo of Tylee at Yellowstone. Lori's brother was there too on that family vacation, and that was the last photo that anybody had seen of her.
So, as the search for JJ and Tylee is going on, Chad Daybell's first wife, Tammy, was found dead in October. So, this was about a month after the kids had originally gone missing or had not been heard from. Initially, it was ruled as natural causes, but after they did a lot of investigating and continued looking into the disappearances of Tylee and JJ, it was revealed that her death was suspicious. The authorities exhumed her body in December of 2019, so 2 months later, and determined that she had likely been asphyxiated.
I think that it's crazy that they decided to exhume her body because it was such a like, with it being such a short amount of time, thankfully they did, because I think had they waited any longer, they probably wouldn't have even been able to make any determinations on the cause of death like that.
Yeah, definitely. So in November of 2019, so this was a month after Tammy Daybell was found dead, Lori married Chad. So to me, definitely suspicious the fact that they got married so quickly.
Yeah, it's like your kids go missing, you get married. Well, okay, your kids go missing, his wife dies, you get married, and then immediately after that, they find that she died from asphyxiation.
Yeah, I would say
And
it's
the kids are still missing through all of this.
exactly, yeah. I mean, like I said, this has been a case that just kinda, like, hit me. They always do, but it's always the ones involving kids. So, in November 2019, when law enforcement began investigating that case, they did it because Lori was failing to cooperate with authorities about where her children were. She would not answer questions, she would not help with the search party, so it was all very suspicious.
Yeah, and
Um
I believe during that time as well, JJ's grandparents and the courts were giving Lori dates on, like, proof of life, basically, like, she needed to
Right,
produce the children to prove that they were okay, and she was not doing that, and she wasn't following the court orders and not talking to anybody.
right. I mean, if it was my kid and I was innocent, I would be doing everything that I could. Like, you can't say much unless it happens to you, but just knowing what she and Chad did, I'm like, you're obviously guilty. The authorities were unable to locate any evidence that the children had been alive in the months following their disappearance. In February of 2020, so this was about 5 months after the kids had not been heard from, and the authorities in Idaho began formally investigating Lori and Chad after discovering that the children were missing and that there were unusual circumstances surrounding the deaths of Lori's former husband, Charles Vallow, and the suspicious death of Chad's wife, Tammy. At this time, Lori and Chad were living in Hawaii, and when authorities attempted to question Lori, she refused to cooperate. She was later charged with desertion and non support of dependent children, and there was growing evidence suggesting that both children had been killed.
Yeah, like, they're just living it up on a vacation, um, no kids, nothing, and, I mean, JJ was still young at this point. I think, what was he, like, 7 or 8, I believe? So definitely still a very dependent child that needed a mother.
Absolutely. Like you said, they were kind of living it up at that point. If my kids were still missing and I didn't know where they were, I'd be searching for them or, interviewing whoever to figure out where my kids are.
Not going to move to an entirely different island and not helping authorities.
Exactly. In June 2020, investigators found the remains of Tylee and JJ buried on Chad Daybell's property in Rexburg, Idaho. So this is where they were living when JJ and Tylee went missing. I think it really just the way that their bodies were found, I think is something that really was a little disturbing. JJ's body wasn't really messed with. Tylee's body was dismembered and burned. And JJ was found in his pajamas, just buried in a shallow grave. And it just like even talking about it, it just kind of like breaks my heart because I'm like, how could a parent who's supposed to love their kid do this to their kid?
Yeah, and I think from, you can kind of see it from both because Tylee, it seems like she never really had a legitimate father figure in her life. And then, you have JJ, and it seems like it's kind of the same situation for him. And then, she goes and she starts seeing this person that obviously does not have the children's best interests in mind whenever he's doing things. So it does break your heart because like these kids, it's almost like they just didn't stand a chance. And the I know for a fact the grandparents of JJ loved him so much, and it's so sad because it's like if you did not want these children, there was somebody that would have loved them and taken care of them.
Yeah, that's what I say about anything that I see where it's like these sweet innocent children were murdered by their parents who are supposed to love and protect them. And instead of just like finding somebody would love them and care for them because you can't or you don't have that mental capacity to do it, that is better than murder.
Yeah, and but I do think that authorities being able to discover the bodies helped because it was a lot easier to be able to charge them, because without the bodies, I think that they were gonna have a really difficult case to even attempt to build there.
Yeah, definitely. So they were both arrested, obviously. Lori was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with conspiracy to commit murder in connection to the deaths of her children, as well as conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Tammy Daybell. Again, we go back to the fact that Lori and Chad got married right after Tammy's death. That was suspicious, obviously, to the authorities as well. Chad Daybell was arrested and charged with similar counts in relation to the children's deaths and Tammy's murder. He faced charges for first degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice for hiding the bodies.
So I think whenever we, talk about it, this case is not just a simple she didn't wanna have kids anymore and she decided to murder them to go and live this life in Hawaii with her husband. These people had some sick, twisted beliefs.
Yeah, they were deeply involved in apocalyptic and doomsday beliefs. Chad was the author of books that focused on the end of the world and spiritual matters, and he believed in the idea of zombies possessing individuals, which played a key role in their justification for killing people who were deemed dark spirits. So I do remember from the documentary that there was an email that had gone around where there was a list of all of those people close to them, and it would say whether they were dark spirits or light spirits. And those that were dark spirits were the ones that would be murdered.
I remember seeing the list as well, and I know specifically that Tylee was listed on there as a dark spirit, and her ex-husband was listed as a dark spirit. So it's definitely telling that, they had these and that they were so, wrapped up in these beliefs that they let it affect their actual day-to-day life, and I think that the brother of Lori also had a lot to do with, like, kind of feeding into these beliefs.
So, Lori and Chad's beliefs and their roles in the deaths of Lori's children and others were tied to their belief in the imminent return of Jesus Christ and the need to rid the world of evil spirits or zombies.
And a lot of this came out at their trials. correct. Like, this is where a lot of these things were brought to light, these crazy beliefs that they had, and this almost like, vigilante type of work that they were doing.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, besides the facts of the murders and stuff like that, this all came out in the trials. Lori's trial was delayed several times due to legal motions, including her mental health status. Her defense team basically was arguing that she was mentally unfit to stand trial, which eventually, after several mental health evaluations, the judge ruled that she was competent to stand trial. My thing is, if your religion is causing you to murder people, I do think that that may be a mental situation, or you're just completely brainwashed by the people that are teaching you these beliefs.
No, I absolutely agree with you there. I think that these teachings, obviously, she took it to the extreme. She's what, people would consider to be an extremist. However, that does not, obviously, they deemed her fit to stand trial. That does not mean that she doesn't know right from wrong just because of a belief. And
Yeah.
I think that this woman needs some serious mental help, but she knew what she was doing and she knew that it was wrong.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Her trial was complex, involving disturbing details about the crimes and the couple's extreme religious beliefs, which we've talked about throughout this whole case. Some of the key themes and evidence presented at the trial were Chad and Lori's shared apocalyptic beliefs, including the idea that the world was nearing the end and that certain people, including Tylee and JJ, had become zombies or possessed by evil spirits. They believed that these individuals needed to be eliminated for righteous to survive. Evidence from text messages, phone records, and witness testimony had all showed that Lori and Chad conspired to kill Lori's children, and that was part of their apocalyptic mission. The prosecution also presented forensic evidence showing that Tylee and JJ were murdered on or around the same time, so back to back, likely by suffocation or shooting. It's just very heartbreaking, the whole thing.
I think that this is also telling of the timeline because there's no, like, evidence that Tylee was alive after that trip to Yellowstone, but there's evidence that JJ was alive for, like, 23 on the 23rd of that same month. And that was about 2 or 3 weeks of a difference. So it makes me wonder, where was Tylee during this time because she's a teenage girl. Like, was she talking to her friends? Was she posting online? Was, any of that kind of stuff? I'd be interested to, why wasn't anybody able to determine where she was?
Right, yeah, I agree. I know in the documentary they had interviewed her friend, but it's just kind of, I don't know. This whole case just rubs me the wrong way.
I think the state of their bodies is also very telling because Tylee seemed to have endured a lot more in her death than JJ did. And it makes me wonder, was Tylee trying to protect JJ? Did she know? It's so sad whenever you think about this because they are kids. And again, you go back to parents are supposed to be protectors. Did the kids know what was happening? Like I said, it just seems like Tylee took a lot more of the brunt of this entire thing, whereas JJ didn't. And I also don't know if that's, again, if it was an age thing, if it was a fighting back thing, if it was an anger thing, like if they had more anger towards Tylee than they did JJ. Um, and I just don't think that that's something that we'll ever know. But I very distinctly remember that Tylee was on the evil spirits list. Like, they needed to get rid of her.
Testimony from family members and friends and law enforcement officers detailed Lori's lies and evasiveness. She had repeatedly made false statements about the whereabouts of the children, claiming that Tylee was at college, which Tylee being only 16, not saying that it couldn't have happened, but
Yeah, they said that she was going to Brigham Young University, which is, a large college, and I don't think that a 16-year-old, I'm sure it's happened, but I don't think that she was, obviously she wasn't there. The school said that she never attended. And again, you'd think that she would have somebody that would be able to attest to the fact that, oh yeah, I had a class with her, or oh, I saw her on campus, but nobody was ever able to do that.
she had also claimed that JJ was with her friends even though the children had already been dead for months. Witnesses testified about Lori's increasing detachment and indifference, as well as her obsession with Chad Daybell and their shared religious beliefs. So it seems like she had already been kind of distancing herself from her kids, and that is what caused this.
Yeah, she let Chad Daybell really manipulate her, and she was manipulated, and he told her that these kids had these evil spirits in them. And, especially whenever it comes to JJ was autistic. It's like it's horrible. It really just shows how brainwashed she was able to become. But I mean, obviously, she has had to have it seems like the evil spirits were in them, not in these children.
Yeah. The prosecution also argued that Lori played a role in Tammy's death, pointing to financial motives and Chad's desire to marry Lori, which we talked about. They got married right after Tammy died. I could see why they would point that to Lori playing a part in it. Tammy's death, again, was initially thought to be from natural causes, but after her body was exhumed and an autopsy was performed, it was found that she had likely been asphyxiated. The evidence that they had showed that Chad and Lori had plotted to kill Tammy, most likely because her death would help remove an obstacle from their relationship and their beliefs. I'm going to assume Tammy did not believe in the same things that Chad believed in, because that's probably why they weren't together. And that's probably why Tammy is now dead.
Yeah, it seems like over the years, Chad became more of an extremist, starting to go to those conferences, starting to write the books. And it also makes me think, did they use the life insurance money from Tammy to fund this move that they had to Hawaii?
Most likely.
It's just odd to me because it does seem like a heavily financially motivated thing, because Tammy really wasn't an obstacle to them. Tammy was not in the way of them being able to really be together. But I mean, like I said, they probably used that money and funded that move to Hawaii.
After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated and delivered its verdict. Lori was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of both Tylee and JJ, conspiracy to commit murder in relation to the death of Tammy, and obstruction of justice for concealing the murders and lying to investigators about the whereabouts of Tylee and JJ. Following the conviction, Lori was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Not sure how I feel about that. I think any murder, especially murder of children, should be death penalty. I don't know if you have that same agreement, or what your feelings are on that.
I feel like women are typically charged lighter than men are, or in these types of cases. I feel like women are not charged as severely as men.
I feel that way. I feel like it should have been the death penalty for it, because she's supposed to protect her children.
Yeah, and I think whenever it comes to the death penalty, I think that that one's tough for me, because I think that if there's no shadow of a doubt that somebody absolutely committed these crimes, then absolutely death penalty. But I think you see so often that people will get put on death row and sentenced to death, and it comes out that it wasn't them. But in these cases, I mean, it's very obvious that these two were guilty of these murders.
Right. I think they both deserve the death penalty. No doubt about that. So lawyers had showed the same evidence for Chad as they did for Lori. And he also was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. So a lot of the same charges. He was charged with the death penalty.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that that's fitting in this situation. I don't think either of these two would ever have the potential to be rehabilitated, and I just think that it shows that like I said, their beliefs are just so outrageous and so almost otherworldly. There's no changing that, and they were a couple that was basically determined to just quote unquote, rid the world of evil. And I think that they would have continued to do that had they been left out of prison. Just these two are just there's no fixing this.
Now we will shift our focus to the tragic case of Tristyn Bailey and the impact that her murder had on her community, as well as the efforts her family has made in the years since to bring awareness to peer violence.
So, Tristyn was a 13-year-old girl from St. Johns County, Florida. She was a seventh grade student. Just all around, everything you see from her friends, her peers, her classmates, her family. She was just an absolute light. She was so well loved by everyone. She was involved within her local community. She was super friendly, popular. She was a great student. She was a cheerleader, just really all around such a great person. Unfortunately, on May 9th of 2021, her mother awakens on Mother's Day to find that Tristyn is not in her room. It says that Tristyn had last been seen around midnight leaving with a classmate from her neighborhood. Later on that morning of Mother's Day, authorities find Tristyn's body in a wooded area near a retention pond in her Durbin Crossing neighborhood in St. Johns County. Tristyn was found with multiple stab wounds, which were determined to be the cause of her death. Within hours, 14-year-old Aiden Fucci, which is a classmate and a neighbor of Tristyn from Patriot Oaks Academy, is identified as a person of interest. Now, Aiden Fucci's girlfriend was questioned, and his girlfriend said that he would often talk about killing people, and that he stated that he had planned to drag a random person into the woods and stab them. He often carried a knife that he would come up behind his girlfriend and pretend to slit her throat. He claimed that he heard voices when he was angry and that he was on antidepressants. Aiden also was said to have had an obsession with knives and that he had named his knives Picker and Poker. The police are quickly gathering evidence to support their case against Aiden Fucci, and they find surveillance footage from the neighborhood of Tristyn and Aiden walking together around midnight. Following that, they find Aiden coming back alone. So they discover that that evening, Aiden had asked a friend for Tristyn Bailey's phone number and had convinced her to leave her home and to meet him at a friend's house. So, like I said, the surveillance video shows Aiden and Tristyn walking together towards this retention pond. But 1 hour and 45 minutes later, that same surveillance shows Aiden walking back alone and carrying his shoes.
Now, were they friends? Because obviously he was able to convince her to come out of the house, but didn't have her phone number. So were they friends or just neighbors, acquaintances?
What I'm gathering is that they were more so acquaintances, but Tristyn was such a friendly person that I don't particularly think that she would have rejected going out and going to this other friend's house. I think she was better friends with that person. So I think that Aiden was able to kind of convince her to do that because Tristyn wanted to be friends with everybody. Now, there's a really large contrast here. So, like I said, Tristyn was really like a well rounded kid, great student, things like that. Aiden had had a lot of disciplinary issues. It seemed like he struggled in school, but Tristyn wanted to be friendly to everybody. She was very inclusive. So I think that they were more so peers, and that's why he had to get her phone number from somebody else that night. When the police were discovering the forensic evidence in this case, they found a buck knife that was in the pond near where Tristyn's body was found. It was missing the tip, and they were able to make a match off of this based off of a fragment that had been lodged in Tristyn's scalp. When they went to Aiden's house, they found wet shoes and bloody clothing in his bedroom. Blood and dirt were on the drain by the bathroom sink, and wet denim jeans were found in his laundry basket. They also found an empty knife sheath in his room, along with a notebook that contained violent drawings.
To me, this sounds like somebody more so with like mental illness or something, because somebody who obviously we know he planned this just based off of like the way that he went about things, but to just leave those things laying around for somebody to find.
Stating that he's hearing voices and that he's on antidepressants, I definitely think that a mental illness factor played into this, but he was deemed competent enough to stand trial. So, there's some give and take there with that where it was made obvious that he was old enough to understand and that he was mentally well enough to understand the consequences of his actions. The autopsy that they did on Tristyn's body really confirmed how brutal this attack was. She had over 114 stab wounds, and at least 49 of those were defensive wounds. Now, there was other details to this, but they were kept confidential due to the violent nature of them. And something else that I found to be chilling about this was that when the police were questioning Aiden Fucci, He was taking Snapchat photos in the back of the police cruiser, making a joke of this, saying, "Hey guys, has anybody seen Tristyn lately?" And one of the friends responded, "You were with her, Aiden. You know what happened to her."
That's definitely chilling to me. I'm like speechless because I can only imagine like her family's response to this and hearing this because you're basically mocking the crime that you just committed.
Yeah, you're bragging about it. It's making light of it, and it's just it was such a heinous crime. It was disgusting, and there was no motive to this. There was no reason for this. There was no reason for the violence. This was just somebody that had decided that they wanted to stab somebody and they wanted to kill someone, and they chose an innocent girl that only wanted to be friends with this kid. That was her only crime here, was that she was accepting of someone and wanted to befriend someone who ended up being a murderer.
I feel like it's always like the nice ones, the friendly ones. They just want to make everybody happy.
He absolutely took advantage of her kindness. And now, after all of this, we find out that In Fuji's house has video surveillance inside the home. And they see that the mother was on video in the home, going into Aiden's room at like 1:30 in the morning, grabbing a pair of wet pants out of his laundry hamper, taking them to a bathroom and scrubbing them clean, and then taking them and putting them back into his room. She gets charged with tampering with evidence, and they put her and Aiden into a room, and she is basically coaching Aiden like they're going to badger you and they're going to badger you. You need to just pick a story and stick with it. And she was questioning if they found anything on the jeans, and she mouthed the word blood to him. So the mom ends up getting 30 days in jail and 5 years of probation for tampering with evidence. And just the mom seemed through, to me, the mom seemed like she was not making him take accountability for what he had done.
I think it would, like, as a mother myself, I think it would be hard to deal with something like this. Like, no, I'm not excusing any of what she did because she helped cover up a murder or tried to cover up a murder, but you have to think, like, as a mother, the things that were going through her mind.
Well, and at this point too, when she's cleaning these pants, they had not discovered Tristan's body yet. So they don't exactly know what has happened. But if my kid came home with bloody, wet clothing, dirty, bloody, wet clothing, I would definitely be questioning what's happening here and why you have these clothes and why you're coming home so late when you're 14 years old.
Yeah, and I mean, is there any knowledge as to if she did question him or did she just assume something bad happened?
I think once she started getting questioned by police, I think she knew that Aiden was the one that had done this. So I don't know if maybe they had had a conversation outside of that where he told her privately that he had done this. And she was coaching him on just, like I said, pick a story and stick with it whenever the cops question you. But ultimately, there was so much evidence, forensic evidence, digital evidence, physical evidence, that it was Aiden that did this, that he was initially charged with second-degree murder, but they ended up changing that to first-degree murder due to the severity of the crime and the evidence that they did gather, and he was charged as an adult in this.
And is he able to face the death penalty?
No. So, although he was charged as an adult, he is still a minor. And so that excludes him from the potential of the death penalty. And whenever he went to court, he ended up maintaining a not guilty plea up until about jury selection time. And at that point, he changed his plea to guilty. On the day that he changed his plea to guilty, he also apologized to the family for his actions. I don't particularly think that that had much of an impact on the family at that point, but that sent him straight into sentencing instead of having to go through the trial. And the judge ended up sentencing him to life in prison. But again, because he's a minor, he can't face the death penalty. And I believe that he needs to serve at least 25 years in prison before he can be looked at again. With the laws in Florida, just the way that it goes whenever you're a minor offender, you have a right to have your case reviewed after 25 years if you're sentenced to life. Now, what I find to be probably the most impactful thing of this entire case, the entire time in court, the hearings and things like that, Tristan's sister, Alexis, she went up on the stand and put a jar, and all she said was 114. And she started placing 114 heart shaped aqua stones into this empty jar. Now, aqua was Tristan's favorite color, and 114 represented the number of stab wounds that Tristyn had inflicted on her during this crime. The entire room sat there in silence for over 2 minutes as she put 114 of these stones into this jar. And I think that that probably spoke louder than anything else could have in terms of a victim impact statement.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the few things that I had seen. I remember seeing this video of somebody putting these heart-shaped stones into a jar and not knowing anything about this case. I just sat there like, wow, like this is the most impactful thing I think I've ever seen, like kind of as a statement, you know?
I think it also showed just the sheer strength of this family throughout this whole thing. This family has been so tough and so strong, and they have really rallied together and they've had the help of their community. And I'll talk about that in a second, but I did want to highlight first that going back to Aiden Fucci, and this will be the last thing that I say about him because I don't feel like he deserves much more of anybody's time. Since he's been in jail, he's been involved in fights, having contraband, bullying inmates out of commissary, threatening them, being combative towards guards, making threats against guards. He has had to be pepper sprayed and restrained on multiple occasions. And he told inmates that he was real because he stabbed someone face to face, unlike the others who resorted to shooting someone. I think that this kid's life has shown to be tragic. You are this young, and this is the mentality that you have, and I don't think that there's any resources in the world that could potentially rehabilitate him. I think he's exactly where he needs to be, and none of this, unfortunately, will bring Tristyn back, but I hope that this kid never sees the light of day outside of the walls of a prison again.
100%. I mean, I'm right there with you. It sounds like to me he thinks he's all big and bad because he did this horrible crime and now he's trying to act like, "Oh, I'm cooler than you because I did this." And it's just disgusting behavior.
No, it really is. Now, the family, like I said, this family has been amazing. They have created a Bailey7 hashtag, which follows their family. It represents all of them and their family. They've used this to do community outreach. They have done so much to unite their community in Tristan's memory, wearing aqua, holding candlelight vigils, memorials, charity events. They've also done a lot to speak out against youth violence, social media's role that it plays, because there were some kids that were trying to use Tristyn Bailey's murder as a way to gain social media notoriety and get popular and get likes and things like that. And the families have also gotten together to discuss preventative measures in schools and communities to protect children and to educate them on how to detect dangers and how to avoid situations like that. Tristyn Bailey's family has created the Tristyn Bailey Strong Facebook page. This is where they do a lot of their outreach. I would highly recommend going and giving it a follow because they advertise online courses that they do, self defense courses that they do through an organization called Women Against Violent Encounters. And they also go to the local schools and they do something called Project iGuardian. And this discusses how to keep children and teens safe from online predators, as well as providing safety tips and resources for parents and guardians. So this family has really taken their tragedy and turned it into something that they are getting involved with the community and hoping that they can prevent this from happening again in the future.
I think they're doing a lot of really great things. We don't hear too much about victims being family members of the victims as well. So, like, the family is victims to this crime, and all the stuff that they're doing to help this to not happen to anybody else just is an amazing thing.
Yeah, like I said, her family is just incredible. The strength and resilience that they've shown, the impact that they're having on their community is stuff that will just really honor Tristan's life and legacy and create something that is long lasting and hopefully will be able to provide other girls in the event that they end up in similar situations. They'll know how to handle things, they'll know how to look for signs of potential peer on peer violence. And, I'm sure that the family agrees that if they're able to save one person, then all their efforts have been worth it.
That wraps up today's episode of Serial Knowledge Crimecast and the discussion of the tangled web of Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, their story of deception, manipulation, and devastating loss, and revisited the tragic case of Tristyn Bailey, a life full of promise cruelly cut short. These cases remind us how fragile and precious life is and the importance of justice for those who can no longer speak for themselves.
As in all the cases that we discussed, our hearts really go out to the families that are affected by these cases. Their courage in the face of unimaginable pain is truly like just a testament to the strength of the human spirit and, their ability to be resilient through being faced with some unimaginable circumstances.
And as always, if you have theories, thoughts, or insights, we want to hear from you. Join the conversation on our social media platforms. The discussion never ends there.
And before we go, we want to go ahead and give the teaser for our next episode. We're going to be diving into the heartbreaking case of Gabby Petito. This was the story that really gripped the nation and shined a light on the dangers of domestic violence. This couple went on a picturesque road trip, and it unfortunately ended in the loss of Gabby Petito. We'll uncover the details and explore how her legacy continues to raise awareness.
You won't want to miss it. Thanks for listening to Serial Knowledge Crimecast. We'll see you next time.